Insiders have discovered that China's export of rare earth to the European Union surged in August, far surpassing exports to the United States. This indicates that behind the EU's current dependence on China's rare earth, the competition surrounding the Chinese Communist Party's trump card, rare earths, in the global tariff war has reached a fever pitch. The CCP's trump card is losing its effectiveness. In response to the tariff war initiated by US President Trump, China began tightening rare earth exports in April. After experiencing supply shortages from April to July, China's rare earth magnet export to the EU suddenly surged in August. Experts suggest that on one hand, this highlights the EU's continued dependence on China for rare earth supplies compared to the United States. On the other hand, it may be an emergency measure by the CCP to address the threat posed by the rapid development of the European rare earth supply chain as the US supply chain takes shape, which could undermine China's dominant position in rare earths. According to data released by Chinese customs on September 20th, in August, rare earth shipments to the EU grew by 21% month-on-month, reaching 2,582 tons, which is 5 times the amount shipped to the US. In contrast, China's exports to the US fell by 5% month-on-month to 590 tons, just 22% of the EU's total. While China's rare earth magnet supply to the EU has surged, Europe is accelerating its plans to implement alternative rare earth supply chains. In the tariff war that broke out this year, China's absolute dominance in the rare earth products industry and its weaponization policies have led both the US and Europe to face unprecedented crisis, prompting Europe to accelerate its search for alternatives. The EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, which came into effect in 2024, includes proposals to recycle more rare earth elements from waste electronic products. On March 17, French media reported on the front page, France and Japan collaborates to build large-scale rare earth recycling plant, reducing dependence on Chinese imports. The report states that Carester, a French startup, held the groundbreaking ceremony for its rare earth recycling plant in Lyon. The French and Japanese governments plan to invest over 100 million euros each to support the project. This joint French-Japanese rare earth recycling enterprise will begin full operations this year. It will be capable of recycling 800 tons of magnets annually, producing 620 tons of rare earth oxides, which accounts for about 15% of global rare earth production. The facility will supply new energy raw materials for industries such as electric vehicles and wind power. According to French media, L'Ecos, apart from China, no other countries in the world have factories of such a large scale. This rare earth recycling company is being built to reduce dependence on imported Chinese rare earths. The French-Japanese joint venture is expected to be completed in the fall of 2026, with production starting by late 2026 or early 2027. Meanwhile, Neo Performance Materials of Canada is intensifying preparations for Europe's first rare earth permanent magnet plant in Estonia. On September 19th, the Financial Times reported that the first European rare earth magnet production plant officially began operations that day. This factory is Neo's first European rare earth magnet plant built in Narva, Estonia. With an investment of $75 million. It is also the first European rare earth company to mass produce rare earth magnets for the European automotive and wind energy industries. According to media reports, the factory began production on the same day with an initial target of producing 2,000 tons of magnets annually, which is approximately 1/10 of Europe's estimated demand in 2025. The company plans to eventually increase its annual output to 5,000 tons, which would be enough to supply over 1 million electric vehicles or over 1,000 offshore wind turbines. The factory is also located next to Neo's existing rare earth separation facility in Estonia. Estonian Prime Minister, along with representatives from major companies such as General Motors, Bosch, Schaeffler, and Mayhel, attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Bosch, the world's largest automotive supplier, issued a statement during the opening ceremony announcing that it had signed a multi-year Memorandum of Understanding with Neo-Estonia, Bosch has received a significant share of the factory's annual magnet production. At the opening, German automotive supplier Schaeffler also signed a long-term procurement agreement with Neo-Estonia. NIO's CEO Rahim Suleiman stated at the ribbon-cutting ceremony that the plant is one of Europe's most important critical materials projects. Currently, over 90% of magnets used in the EU rely on China, which is unsustainable, especially given that demand is expected to nearly double over the next decade. As such, the Neo-Estonia plant has significant room for further production growth. Suleiman also revealed that Neo-Estonia has signed multiple contracts worth between $100 million and $5 billion, with major deliveries set to begin in the first quarter of 2026. Neo's plans align with the EU's goal, which aimed to increase the domestic processing rate of critical materials like rare earths to 40% by 2030, reducing reliance on China. In line with this, the Neo's Estonia factory has received a grant of up to 18.7 million euros from the EU. The Financial Times reported that the factory's production marks a significant breakthrough in Europe's efforts to localize the supply of rare earth permanent magnets aimed at reducing reliance on Asian, particularly Chinese, rare earth supply chains. The factory's raw materials will be sourced from Australia, and it has signed a long-term supply agreement with several European automakers. These developments in Europe have made the CCP anxious. Starting in July, China suddenly accelerated its exports of rare earth products to the EU. No one believes that this move by the CCP and the EU's determination to revitalize the rare earth industry is purely coincidental. On the contrary, it is widely seen as an attempt by the CCP to use its current price advantage to suppress European rare earth companies and tighten its control over the EU's rare earth market by increasing supply. However, it is clear that these actions are too late. During the US-China and EU-China trade negotiations this year, rare earth magnets became one of the most contentious issues. The EU's excessive reliance has exposed its industries to the CCP's threats in a particularly severe manner. Although there has been a recent rebound in rare earth magnet supplies to Europe, the earlier supply shortages continue to affect the entire EU. In a recent report, the China-EU Chamber of Commerce stated that due to the rare earth supply shortages from April to June, EU companies experienced 7 production stoppages in August, with an additional 4 to 6 stoppages expected in September. Europe's actions are not isolated in Western businesses' full counterattack against the CCP's rare earth leverage. On May 16th, Australian company Lynas announced the production of rare earth oxides in Malaysia, marking the first time a company outside China has achieved commercial separation production of heavy rare earths, breaking China's long-standing dominance in the production and supply of rare earth oxides. To weaken China's dominance in the rare earth market, the White House signed a $258 million contract with Lynas in May to build a new rare earth refining plant in Texas. In June, Lynas produced another rare earth refined product, terbium. The efforts to challenge China's dominance in the rare earth market are not limited to Lynas. An innovative US company has produced refined cobalt at cost no higher than China's. On May 24th, the US company Xerion Advanced Battery announced a breakthrough in rare earth materials production that could change the game in the US-China trade war. Xerion achieved a groundbreaking step in refining high-purity cobalt metal and has started pilot-scale production at its 5-ton capacity plant in Dayton, Ohio. In June, the U.S. Department of Defense announced a $400 million investment in MP Materials and set a price floor for its critical refined rare earth products at twice the market price of similar Chinese products. The agreement also includes a guaranteed purchase of all rare earth products produced by MP's new refining plant in its first 10 years. In July, MP Materials, which had previously only supplied refined rare earth products to defense manufacturers, signed a $500 million supply agreement with Apple. This marked one of the most explosive and symbolic events in the reconstruction of the rare earth supply chain since the US decided 30 years ago to exit rare earth refining production and become entirely reliant on China's supply chain. In August, General Motors signed an agreement with Texas-based Novion Magnetics Inc. to supply rare earth magnets for its pickup trucks and SUVs. GM also plans to source most of its rare earth magnets from domestic suppliers. MP Materials, the largest rare earth miner in the US, is set to surpass NEO in annual production capacity, with its newly invested rare earth refining production line currently under construction. Insiders comment that given the US technological advantage and corporate credibility, MP Materials is likely to become the new rare earth powerhouse in the near future. Experts note that despite appearing disjointed, the rare earth refining investment and the construction and expansion of factories in Australia, the US, and Europe are not independent supply chains. Instead, they form part of a larger cohesive rare earth supply chain led by the US. This supply chain, coordinated through the G7 and the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, integrates mining, refining, and demand into a single system that operates independently of China, creating a second rare earth supply chain with scale efforts and coordinated actions. On June 16th, at the G7 summit in Canada, G7 leaders reached a preliminary agreement to formulate a joint strategy to protect the supply of critical materials and enhance the economic reliance of G7 member countries. According to CNBC, the proposed G7 strategy includes key measures such as forecasting potential shortages of critical minerals, coordinating responses to market disruptions, and promoting the diversification of mining, processing, manufacturing, and recycling channels. Meanwhile, the US is also discussing and coordinating economic and trade issues within the Quad, a primary forum for security-related discussions. On July 1st, more than 40 companies from the US, Japan, Australia, and India participated in a Quad meeting to discuss cooperation, with the main focus being the diversification of critical mineral supply chains. Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar, Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong, Japanese Foreign Minister, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio attending the meeting. On the first day of the meeting, the US announced the launch of a critical minerals initiative with Australia, India, and Japan. The initiative is an ambitious expansion of our partnership to strengthen economic security and collective reliance by collaborating to secure and diversify critical minerals supply chains. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized that the four countries are important strategic partners and stressed the need for cooperation, particularly in the raw materials sector. Rubio noted that one of his goals is to achieve the global diversification of critical minerals supply chains, not only to secure raw materials, but also to gain the ability to process and refine them into usable materials. Among the four countries, Japan leads in rare earth refining and rare earth element recycling technologies. Australia has successfully produced 2 rare earth metals. India has seen several companies invest in rare earth refining plants, and France boasts the world's largest rare earth recycling plant. There has recently been even more encouraging news coming from the US. According to Fox News, in April, China imposed export restrictions on 7 rare earth elements, directly impacting key manufacturing industries in the US and Europe. Ford Motor Co. was forced to temporarily shut down its Chicago assembly line, halting production of the Explorer model for 7 days. Aerospace, semiconductor, and defense contractors were also affected. However, the U.S. scientific community finally achieved a breakthrough. Jianping Wang, a Chinese-American professor at the University of Minnesota, led a team that after 10 years of effort solved a scientific challenge that had persisted since the 1950s. Combining the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, iron, with nitrogen in the air to synthesize high-performance iron nitride magnets. Iron nitride remains fully magnetized even at a high temperature of 200 degrees Celsius, outperforming China's rare earth magnets. More importantly, both nitrogen and iron are non-monopolizable resources, meaning that the US may finally be able to break free from its dependence on rare earths. Experts believe that if this breakthrough can be commercialized, it will significantly strengthen U.S. manufacturing and national security. The CCP became aware of the U.S.-led rare earth supply chain breakthrough months ago. On April 20th, Global Times, a Chinese state-run media outlet, published an article stating, The US MP Materials Company, which has long entrusted us with the processing of rare earth ores, announced the suspension of rare earth refined ores exports to us and has not resumed this trade. This should be seen as a turning point, signaling the basic formation of the Western rare earth supply chain. Global Times recently published another article stating that in August, the US imported less than one-fifth of the rare earths from China compared to the EU. This is a strong signal that the US is becoming increasingly self-sufficient in rare earth refining products. NEO's rare earth production in Estonia is also a clear sign that the EU's domestic supply of rare earth products will rapidly increase. The article concluded pessimistically, stating we must adapt to the new trends in the rare earth industry and update our basic understanding of the rare earth sector. Previously, we had absolute control over rare earth products supply, but from now on, we may only have bargaining power for low-cost rare earth products. Analyst Mr. Z noted that the breakthrough in rare earth by the US and Europe are extremely significant and undoubtedly fatal for the CCP, as rare earth are the CCP's ultimate weapon in controlling the global manufacturing industry and supply chains. One of the key reasons for President Trump's urgency to mediate the Russia-Ukraine war was also rare earths. Both Russia and Ukraine have substantial rare earth reserves. If the war cannot end, or if Ukraine is eventually fully controlled by Russia, the US would be at a greater disadvantage in countering the CCP, which holds the largest rare earth reserves globally. After Trump initiated the tariff war, the CCP ambitions in rare earth were exposed. The US began leading its allies to revive the rare earth industry, yet it takes time and space. Therefore, Trump sought to end the Russia-Ukraine war quickly to free up financial and military resources to put more pressure on the CCP, forcing them to make concessions on rare earth issues. As time progressed, the CCP's economy continued to shrink under the pressure of tariffs, but it held onto its last rare earth card to counter the US and Europe. It also used the nefarious longevity plan to tightly bind a vulnerable and desperate Putin, continuing to restrain the US on the European battlefield. However, the US once again demonstrated its powerful wartime industrial capability, achieving near self-sufficiency in rare earth supply in just a few months, and making breakthroughs in research and development by creating unlimited low-cost alternatives, which can be considered another industrial miracle since World War II. Meanwhile, Europe, through collaboration with countries like Australia and Japan, although behind the US, is gradually catching up and is expected to be free from the CCP's rare earth control by 2026. This series of changes is clearly reflected in Trump's stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump is no longer eager to play the role of mediator. After reaching an agreement where Europe provides the funding and the US supplies the weapons, he casually stated, "Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while." Recently, he even referred to Russia as a paper tiger, emphasized that NATO should shoot down any Russian aircraft violating airspace, and expressed full confidence that Ukraine would reclaim all of its occupied territories. Mr. Z pointed out Trump has always been giving Putin chances, but as the situation evolved and Putin became increasingly entangled with the CCP, the US led Europe out of the rare earth crisis. The breakthroughs in rare earth by the US and the EU have now formed a pincer moved against the CCP, with China's ultimate economic weapon, the rare earth card, gradually losing its effectiveness. Trump no longer cares about Putin and is now directly striking at the mastermind behind him.